but that doesn't absolutely. I'd like to just kind of dive right in right now, if that's okay. Craig, so thank you, Craig. Thank you, Volker. Thank you, everybody. Doreen, Angela, your presentations were absolutely spot on. And I just want to say it's just an absolute pleasure to be here. And yes, I am lazy. So when we're talking about that, I think Angela mentioned it in one of her in just the LinkedIn piece. I own that. I am lazy. I am lazy. I don't know if that's my essence or not, but it's I will own that laziness and how it actually shows up in my mindset sometimes, especially when I'm dealing with imposter syndrome. So go back to 2005, if I may. I was what they call now the Chief Human Resource Officer or Chief People Officer. I love that we use the word chief on everything now, right? But the head of HR for a $3 billion company. And I use that term, the money term, because it just escapes me, right? Even today, it escaped me back then in terms of, wow, okay, how did I even get here? I had no idea. I felt like, wow, are they going to find out that I'm a fake? Are they going to find out I'm a fraud? And are they going to tap me on the shoulder one day and ask me to leave because I really don't know what I'm doing? The irony would be that, HR would be the enterprise that would probably be asking me to leave, which was the enterprise that I actually was heading up. The irony of that is not lost on me. However, those are the thoughts I had. One of the presentations I was doing was we were a company that was part of JP Morgan's private equity portfolio. And I was doing a board presentation back at JP Morgan in New York City. I walked into this boardroom. It was as ornate as like anything you can imagine as you look at board rooms, right? It's on like the 6,000th floor of a skyscraper in New York. And I'm going in there and I'm thinking, oh my God, I don't belong here. What am I doing? What are they going to, they're going to like show me out. They're going to like tell me like, okay, you don't know what you're doing. When I got up and I presented, I was very grounded. I was very centered. I was very clear because I knew my material. I knew the people piece. I had an incredible team of people who were a lot smarter than me anyway, that helped me and supported me in compensation and in learning development and in recruiting and all the people aspects. And I relied on them. And I was able to present that very articulate in a very articulate manner. When I got done, the chairman of our board came up and said, and he happened to be the president of Deloitte, former CEO and president of Deloitte Consulting. He came up to me and he said, Ed said to me, wow, boy, you sure know the people stuff. He goes, yeah, that was incredible. You really know your people stuff. And I sat there and I looked at him and I was like, oh my gosh, does he know that I really don't? I'm really a fake and a fraud and all these things. And I sat there and I recognized and I took in that acknowledgement. Right there, I understood about the imposter gap. So that's one of the things I want to talk about today. When we think about if we're a fake or a fraud or I don't belong here, sometimes the result or sometimes what people will say to us is, you need to have more confidence. It's not that. It's not having more confidence because I was confident. I stood up there. I owned the room. I stood up there. I could communicate in a very articulate way. So I was very confident. I was just a confident imposter. I was just somebody who was like, wow, imposter syndrome is not necessarily having more confidence or even trying to get rid of your self-doubt. Imposter syndrome actually is about thinking you have to be somebody else to be really successful in the role. So you can go through your role in your life being a confident imposter, but you will always have this gap. Hashtag mind the gap. Hashtag I began to love the gap because that's what I needed to do if I didn't want to have this pain of feeling like a fake or a fraud. Now, that's my little intro of what imposter syndrome is. Let me go in and share my screen here, and we'll get into a little bit more details about how did I find all this out? How did it all show up? How did it all like come about? And where am I today, 2021? Let me start my timer. Okay, so again, I love being here. This is wonderful. I love all of you. I love the honor of being here. So this picture right here, I took the other day. I was down in a lovely community called Cambria, which is down on the Central California coast. A lot of you are shaking your heads. You're very familiar with it, close to Paso Robles. It was absolutely beautiful. And we spent some time there. So I want us to look at this. I took this picture. So, wow. I mean, the fact that I could even get the camera pointed out was a good thing, because usually isn't it always the selfies, which I actually don't do a lot of. So I want you to look at this picture for a moment. And I just want us to take, let's just take a deep breath, whatever that means to you. Like, let's just take a second and just ground ourselves in the beauty that this planet gives us every day, that we sometimes we feel like we have to capture in a nanosecond on our phones, when in fact, sometimes it's not just the photo, but it's what's up here, right? And I just want us to really start this way. And I just want us to really get some grounded, get some clarity, get some mindfulness on the beauty that is the world. And that's just, it just means a lot to me to really just take that deep breath in and just kind of like release anything that you're bringing in with us today, so we can have a wonderful discussion of how not to be a fake and how not to be a fraud. So we're going to spend about 3 different parts here. First one is going to be, what is imposter syndrome? Greetings from your imposter syndrome. Wish you deserved to be here. So we're going to talk a little bit about what is imposter syndrome and why it's important. I love this from Liz and Molly. You'll see a few of their vignettes throughout my presentation. If anything, the last few years, it's that we're human. So, hello, I'm Paul. Hello, I'm your facilitator. Hello, I'm your coach. Hello, I'm just stressed. I am judgy. I am proud sometimes. I am jealous. I am a comparative person. I am motivated. I am excited. I am angry. I am because I'm human. And that's what imposter syndrome also brings out. And that's what we'll talk about in terms of how does that humanness come out and sometimes get us stuck. It gets us stuck up here in our heads. And I want us to just really kind of be aware of that. Do you ever wonder sometimes, like, you're facing one way and most of the people are facing the other way and you're trying to fit in? It's like, I just don't know if I actually belong here. I dress the part. We kind of look similar, because many people in organizations, they kind of have a certain way of norming and so forth to the culture or the values, but you just don't think you quite fit in, right? And that's really a lot about who should we be? We carry a lot of that boulder. We carry a lot of that burden with us. It's just who I am. I'm human, but sometimes we're trying to push so much uphill. And whether that just comes with our anxiety, it comes with our fixed or fear mindset. It just comes with everything that, wow, I'm carrying so many burdens, most of which other people don't know about, right? And imposter syndrome and what makes up imposter syndrome can be part of that burden. And again, sometimes we're sitting at the back of the plane, and sometimes we look out and it's like, I don't know if I really belong here. I'm not sure I'm supposed to be going where I'm going. I'm not really sure this is me. I'm going to kind of try to fit in here. I'm going to try to everyone's going to not really notice who I am, because I'm really, really not feeling it. I'm showing all of these because up to 80%, and even some percentages are like 90% of folks feel that they have imposter syndrome. And these are successful professionals that have felt like a fake, or have felt like a fraud, or have felt like any one of these sticky notes. I'm not smart enough, or good enough, or pretty enough, or funny enough. I just got lucky. Anyone could have done that. I don't know if any of you have ever thought that, or when you received a compliment, or you've given a compliment to somebody and that response is, oh yeah, anyone could have done that. Or yeah, it was just luck. It was just luck, I'm a fraud. I'm going to be found out. Why would anyone be interested in what I have to say? Everyone else has their stuff together, or any one of these pieces, and anything that you can kind of make up. Wait till people see who and how I really, really am. By the way, I'll stop right here for just a nanosecond and let you know, at the conclusion of my presentation today and the time that we'll have going forward, you'll get a copy of all the slides. You'll also get a PDF of a book that I use in my coaching, and not my book, by the way. This is not about me. It's about how I'm serving and how I serve my clients. So you'll get a PDF of the Positive Intelligent book. And you'll also get a PDF of something I put together called 50 Ways to Hack Your Imposter Code. So that's another PDF. So you got some wonderful gifts coming, and I'll show those in just a few minutes from now. But I just want you to know, don't worry about copying down anything or taking any notes. You know, many times as a coach, as I work as an executive coach and so forth, I don't even know what executive coach is. Even when I say that, sometimes it's like, yeah, I do coach people that are in senior leadership roles, but I like to think I just coach the person who happens to be in a certain role. And that could be any role in life. I know for many instances, we need to use our titles. So sometimes I coach a lot of folks in the corporate world. I work a lot in technology. I work a lot with folks, especially that have strong algorithms up here. And they need to sometimes break those algorithms, right? So they're in the engineering or the technical world. A lot of times I hear, you know, there are people here, that person got promoted, that person's moving ahead, that person's doing something I really want to do. And I feel like I'm more qualified than them. And I love this quote from Fearless Soul that put out a couple weeks ago. There are definitely people less qualified than you doing the things you want to do. They simply decided to believe in themselves. And that's what imposter syndrome will help kind of break that habit of you, in terms of actually giving you an opportunity to believe in yourself. Because I believe when we have imposter syndrome and we can recognize it and we can understand, as Doreen was talking about the essence of things, and understanding your essence and being aware of your essence, that beautiful exercise she led us on, it's really becoming more aware, paying attention. That helps to dilute your saboteurs, which we'll get to in a moment. And it helps to dilute your imposter syndrome. I mentioned to you before, I'm lazy. So when I hear things about, I have to overcome something, or we have to fight this, or no pain, no gain, and all those phrases we love to hear, and are snapped up on LinkedIn sometimes, I'm like, oh, I'm too tired. I'm too tired to think about, overcoming something. I have to, don't we have to overcome everything in life? No, I want to make it work for me if there's a way to do that. I want to integrate it into what I want to do. So believing in yourself is just putting on what you need to do, paying attention to what you need to do to really believe in yourself. You either can be the goldfish or the shark, or both, depending on the situation, right? So here are the bottom 4 things I hear about imposter syndrome that I like to throw away all the time. You just need to have more confidence. I've already talked about that, right? It's not about having more confidence. It's really understanding that when we are feeling our imposter, it is really thinking that we have to be somebody else to be successful in the role that we're in. This can happen for parents, new parents. One of the biggest occupations that deals with imposter syndrome are physicians, because when they go through all of their incredible training, that discipline, that rigor, and then they get out there and, the lives of somebody is in their hands, so to speak, right? They can really deal with imposter syndrome. They can really deal with, wow, what am I supposed to do here? I'm feeling like I really don't belong in here at this hospital or this institution or whatever it might be. So it's not about just having more confidence. It really is understanding there is a gap between who I think I am and who I think I need to be. Another one is, don't worry, it's just all in your head. Well, duh. When I heard that, I was like, well, of course, everything is in our head, right? And most of what gets us stuck is in our head. Every now and then we might get stuck walking around or driving around or running around. Normally, what gets stuck is up here. So yes, everything is in our head. It will go away over time. That's a possibility, but I don't like to just chance it. when I'm dealing with something myself, when I'm dealing with my vulnerabilities and I'm dealing with things that I need to kind of work on for myself, that paying attention to who I am, I don't want to just take a chance that it'll go away over time. I really want to know what I need to do about that right now, if I can, in order to move ahead. Those of us that are coaches, as most of us probably are in here, and coaches and consulting and all the different roles that we play, you're definitely my tribe, right? We're a wonderful community. We know that coaching really focuses on our current environment and then moving forward. And so I don't want to just wait for something to go away. I want to author that result myself. I want to author what that is. Or sometimes people just say, oh, you know what? Imposter just tells you it's time to give up. Don't even, if you're feeling like a fraud or you're feeling like a fake, why would anyone want to feel that way? It's just time for you to give that up. It's just time for you to, you know what? You're not really an author. Put that away. Who do you think you are that you think you can write something that somebody's gonna read, much less pay for? You just need to give that up, which is what happens in so many instances. So these are kind of the bottom four pieces about imposter syndrome that a lot of times conventional wisdom might say, oh, just do this and you can deal with it. Not really. The top four is what I really want to say around imposter syndrome and clarify is it was actually formally introduced in 1978. So it was actually recognized as a phenomenon. Now, it got the name imposter syndrome through kind of its history and how it evolved. It's not technically or medically a syndrome. It's more of an imposter phenomena. And I love that. I mean, I'm all about phenomenons. I'll own that piece. Syndrome sounds very clinical and very medical, and it's not necessarily categorized as such, but it is formally introduced, and it was done by a study by Clancy and Imes back in 1978. And it was thought it only pertained primarily to the female gender. It was just, well, women deal with imposter syndrome. Well, that's absolutely true. Women do deal with it, but men deal with it just as much. Women were the first to admit it. Women were the first to say, what's going on here? I'm feeling like a fake or a fraud. So they brought it out more. And then the men were like, no, I don't have that. Nowadays in 2020, 2021 that we're in, thank you for, I need to remind myself what the year is sometimes, right? I find when I'm working with my clients, female and male, I see it equitably. I see it across the board equitably in all. Men don't always understand sometimes because it hasn't necessarily evolved, but it's across all genders, across all ages, and across all life scenarios. I had the pleasure and I was blessed to be able to speak at the University of California People Management Conference, August 2019, and it was held down at UCLA. And it was all the administrative part of UC. It was an incredible conference. It was a lot of fun. And I touched on imposter syndrome in my talk, in my session. And it was incredible because once I touched on it, it all of a sudden just kind of took on a life of its own within the group. There was about 70 people in my breakout session, and they represented all the UC campuses, which by the way was so cute because they all sat at their tables. So you had Santa Cruz and you had Berkeley and you had UCLA and Riverside and Merced and all the different UC campuses. And they all had their kind of distinct way about them. It was actually very, very telling. I stopped as a facilitator, just as an aside, I stopped that and made them all get up and mingle with each other and sit. So that it was like, let's break out of that. But when we got into imposter syndrome, it was, they took that off. They said, we see this in students all the time. We see this, in the academic world, which of course makes sense. I remember when I went to college decades and decades and decades and decades ago, undergrad, yeah, we're depending on what our life experiences are. I had incredible time in high school. I had fun. It was like, wow, this is so much fun. I love school. I love my friends. Oh yeah, I don't know about the book part, but it's like all this other stuff. You get to college and it's like, oh, wait a minute, do I really belong here? Oh, and it's all these like smart people and all these, all these kids, quote unquote, that seem to have so much more on the ball than me. It can really and that's where it can really start. It can start in any aspect of our life scenarios. That could be one of the triggers, is the academic world. And they mentioned that. So it can occur across all genders, ages, and life scenarios. Up to 90% of successful professionals have admitted it, having it at one or more points in their lives. Some folks live with it all the time, like myself. I mean, when I say that I live with it all the time, I just is something that I recognize it can kind of be triggered, and I just might have an imposter moment that I now celebrate. And I'll get to that in a moment. And it's all about, as I mentioned, the gap, minding the gap and loving the gap. And when I work with my clients, including myself, and when my coach works with me, it's about really understanding, right, where we are and where we think we need, or who we think we need to be, and really how to close that gap even more. And that's the work I've been able to do. And it's been incredible work. I'm going to share with you in just a moment. These are just some of the folks, including myself right there, though I wasn't that young when I started. But these are just some of the folks, from Howard Schultz and Michelle Obama and the late Maya Angelou and all these other folks. Some I don't always know their names. By the way, I'm one of these people where I'll tell you that I love a song, but I will never know the name of the song or the artist. Same with movies, and the same with a lot of the celebrities. Oh, I like him or her, but I won't always know who they are. It drives sometimes my friends crazy. But Jodie Foster is somebody who is actually recognized, and she talks quite a bit about it. Tom Hanks actually talked about it in one of his acceptance speeches at the Oscars. And he talked about having it, and he talked about, wow, it's like, here I am. And so it shows that he can be really confident in his craft, as everyone is, as we all are, but you can still feel that you're not quite who you think you should be. And so this just goes to show you that if all these people feel that way, I certainly, and a lot of us can feel that way. And this isn't about all of you do. I'm not saying you have to have imposter syndrome. I'm not saying you all feel like a fake or fraud, but you may come in contact with folks that do. In your role as a coach, in your role as a consultant, it's more than entirely possible that you already have. It's also one of the hidden layers of disengagement within an organization. So I just I want to bring that out, because organizations don't necessarily talk about imposter syndrome. They don't necessarily, it's not something that is explicit within an organization, but it can come out. And it's one of the biggest reasons, number one, that people feel disengaged. So we do all these incredible engagement surveys that orgs do, right? But can be one of the things that people feel like they are absolutely disengaged. So I'm now going to continue on before our breakout session and just talk about, how do the saboteurs come into imposter syndrome? If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. We'll monitor the chat. I'm not a really good multitasker, which I think is supposed to be a good thing, that we're not supposed to be really good at multitasking. So I'll have the support of my friends at BACN to kind of help monitor the chat if there's any questions that come up. But I want to just go on with the saboteur piece, and then we'll get right into our breakout session. So how do the saboteurs fit into this? And what are the saboteurs? So all of you that took that saboteur assessment by Positive Intelligence, Positive Intelligence. This is a book and a body of work by Shahzad Shamain. Now, Shahzad is a Stanford lecturer. He's a researcher. He's a scientist, an engineer. He's got an incredible background. Those of you that are familiar with the Coaches Training Institute, or CTI, he was CEO of CTI for many years. So he's got an incredible background. And he found this whole body of work to say, like, we have these quote unquote saboteurs, and I like to call them the saboteur voices, that show up. They're evolved from us when we're small. They're actually come into our world to protect us in certain situations, right? And the saboteurs can create an enormous amount of stress in our brain. They can create like this enormous amount of stress in our brain. And thus they can kind of keep us stuck. They can kind of keep us kind of where we are, and create even more stress. Shirzad decided to do an incredible amount of research where he interviewed lots of CEOs and their teams, lots of students, lots of athletes, and then added into that like 500,000 or 500,000 folks from all different countries. And his research is what's included in the book. And that's where he came up with the whole saboteur piece that is based on neuroscience. It's based on positive psychology, which I know a lot of you are very aware of, cognitive psych, and also the performance piece. What makes certain performers stand out from the rest of the population, right? He looked at it because he himself, now this is the piece where he got really vulnerable. He looked at it himself where he got incredibly, like he was triggered by all these negative emotions. And he was like, can negative emotions ever be helpful for us? Like when my saboteur is triggered, maybe my judge, maybe my people pleaser, maybe my controller, it can be helpful for 1 second as an alert signal. But if we stay in negative emotion, it hurts our ability to see clearly and respond. So if we stay in that negative emotion, if we let that saboteur take over, and the saboteurs kind of all make up our imposter voice, could be the judge, could be our hyperachiever, can be our hypervigilant, and it could be a combination of voices like it is with me that make up our imposter voice. But if we stay there and we let them take over, we're negating our empathy, we're negating our curiosity, we're negating our creativity, and we're negating the opportunity to be really laser focused and really take those deliberate and purposeful steps that we need to go forward. So he actually looked at, when we look at the saboteurs, they're parts of the left brain. They're the limbic system, the brain stem, versus our sages. Now, I'm going to save the sages for a later time. You're going to get all the material so you can peruse what the sages do and how the sages kind of counteract our saboteurs, right? And we want to be in our sage, I like to think of the sage as sort of the growth mindset versus the fixed mindset. To borrow Carol Dweck's book on mindsets, the fixed mindsets keep us in fear. The sages are our growth mindset. And it's from a physical standpoint, it's the middle prefrontal, it's the cortex, it's the empathy circuitry, it's the parts of the right brain. But for me, when I look at all this, I'm like, this is the science behind it at a topical level. It really is our fixed mindset versus our growth mindset. And we go back and forth. It's not that, it's not that we're always going to be in the growth mindset. We certainly don't want to live completely in the fixed mindset, but we want to go back and forth. And these are the saboteurs that you were introduced to through the assessment: the controller, the pleaser, the hyper rational, where everything has to make sense, the stickler. You have to stick to this policy. You have to stick to the rules. You have to stick to this particular time. The victim, the restless, the hypervigilant, the judge, the avoider, and the hyperachiever. These make up our saboteur voices. And I hope through the report or through that assessment, you got a little bit more awareness of like, oh yeah, maybe that I can kind of see where that validates. For instance, with me, my top 3 saboteurs are restless, hyperachiever, and controller. So the restless is bright, shiny object. I have like multiple Chrome tabs open at any one time on my browser, and I'll dive in here and I'll dive in there. Oh, that program looks really good. I love what Doreen said. I'm going to go get that. Oh, what Angela said. I'm going to go do that right now. Oh, now what is Volker talking about? I'm going to go buy that right now. The restless keeps us restless, and we always are chasing that bright, shiny penny. So we actually never follow through on things. That's how it shows up with me. Now, I'm an introvert by nature. You may be thinking, yeah, right, you are. You're like an imposter introvert, but I am. I'm an introvert that needs to be by himself to replenish, to re-energize. And I have I have to have a strong discipline of getting back into my introversion self to really understand how I can put my restless saboteur to sleep. So without further ado, I want to go right in now, due to the time, to our breakout session. And let me just finish this slide here. The saboteurs motivate us through negative emotions, and the sage motivates us through positive emotions. Now, what I'd like you to do is you're going to go get chapters 1 through 8 of Shirzad's book. You're going to have that as a gift. I'm also going to offer all of you a 20-minute session in October or November. The calendar link will be available to you if you'd like to go deeper into the saboteurs and sages. And what I invite you to do is to peruse his book. His book is incredibly readable. It's a book that if I can read it and understand it and enjoy it, it's a book that a lot of people can. And if you can peruse that and understand it before we meet, then we can have a little bit more conversation of their saboteurs and sages and why we sort of want to pivot ourselves and finesse our sage voice. So I'm going to hand it over to Arika to take us into the shaky voice breakout. Shaky voice is a time in our lives when we had a shaky voice. It's when our imposter or one of our saboteurs could appear. And it's a time when we need to persevere through something. I'm going to be launching a podcast later this year called The Shaky Voice, where I'm going to talk to folks who've had a shaky voice in life and what they've done to commit themselves to persevering through that. So I want to take us into a shaky voice breakout right now so we can learn a little bit more from each other about a time in our lives when we had a shaky voice and what we did to persevere. Let me stop the share. Okay.
All right, so Paul, I have posted the description in the chat for the breakout. Wonderful. And I'm ready to go. Would you just recap what they're going to do? They're going to choose a group leader. That's going to be the timer.
Yeah, so please choose a group leader whose first name is closest to the start of the alphabet. Sometimes we get in these groups and we can spend a few minutes like deciding who's going to do what. Just decide who's got the first name closest to the alphabet. Group leader keeps the time and helps to ensure everyone has a voice for about 2 minutes. Group leader should go last in the share. So save yourself for the last piece. The other participants can volunteer to go in any order. Describe a life situation when you experienced your shaky voice, a time when you were unsure of yourself. Maybe you felt like a fake or fraud, or maybe you just needed more confidence. It might have not necessarily had anything to do with being an imposter, but kind of that time is like, whoa, I have a shaky voice right now. But you persevered. And I want to hear from folks in terms of like, what was that you garnered? How did you go deep within and persevere through that shaky voice moment? What were you doing and what did you do to persevere?
Wonderful. So we have 10 minutes and then you get a 1-minute warning before you pull back. And you're randomly assigned to a different group than last time. So go and enjoy each other's company.
Great. Okay, we are back. How is everyone back? It looks like everyone's back, right?
Yeah.
Everyone's back. Okay, let me just ask the group here. If anyone, how was that? Did we have some shaky voice moments? I know in the group I was in, I appreciate the vulnerability. How did we have some shaky voice moments from the group? Lisa's doing a thumbs up. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Did we learn anything about our shaky voice or how we persevere? Anything about our own sort of ability, to kind of use ourselves in terms of how we can persevere in the shaky voice moment? Craig? Joey?
Joey, yeah, just say it's interesting. The thought that came to mind is like my shaky voice really shows up when I'm doing marketing. Like when I talk, I feel very confident and I can say stuff, but then when I have to put it out on paper and the idea of people judging and all that kind of stuff, that really triggered my, I didn't realize it, but that really triggers the shaky voice.
Yeah, wonderful. That I appreciate that. Thank you, Joey. Craig, you had your hand.
Sometimes the story I tell about my shaky voice is totally wrong and it does me a disservice. I was sure people were leaving a program because of me, and they actually had an early flight to leave. They'd have left later because of me, but it's not always about us.
It's not always about us. One thing I've learned through this about the storytelling, that the stories we tell ourselves, we are all authors. So whenever I hear people say, oh, I'm not an author. Oh, yes, we are. Because we can author incredible stories that start up here. So we absolutely have that creativity around authorship, because we can create those stories right up here. Let me just go back, and then I'll come back and answer. I know we've got some questions in the chat, but let me just finish up with what we're going to be talking about today. Go back into my okay, shaky voice breakout. What we've kind of touched on here a little bit is a Japanese philosophy that some of you might be familiar with called Kinzuki. And I'm going to, that's just my little Japanese accent, which just goes out the window. But I do want to try to pronounce it the way I went onto YouTube and listened to those pronunciations. It's that Japanese Zen philosophy. And some of you might be very familiar with it because there's been a lot written about it, where when something breaks, like a bowl, they put it back together, and they revere it with that golden lacquer, and they hold it in even more esteemed respect than what the original was. Now, if you think about this as it pertains to the humanness of who we are, how many times do we do that to ourselves? We break ourselves, but we don't always put ourselves back together with that respect, with that reverence, with that golden lacquer, and hold ourselves in even more esteem. This is an incredible philosophy that I just came upon one day on a little postcard I was reading, that I picked up. That I was walking through the airport at San Francisco. There was a little postcard on the ground. I picked it up, and it was definitely this picture. And on the back was the philosophy in explanation form. It wasn't even a postcard that was written. And I thought, this must be a message somewhere from the friendly skies God, that I need to really understand this philosophy more. So I've taken it with me everywhere I go, because it really has to do with, that's what we do. We do it to ourselves, and we help other people as they break. And that's what life's about. We're going to have all different areas of our life where we break, but we want to put ourselves back together even stronger than we were. This is the National Science Foundation did a study back in 2005, which sounds like a long time ago now, although I'd like to think it's not. But the average person has anywhere from 12,000 to 60,000 thoughts per day. And, any of those, any range of that number is incredible. Of those thoughts, they found that 80% are negative thoughts, or tend to be that negativity, like, well, what if this happens? And what if that happens? And this might happen. I better watch for this. We have that negativity bias, which is, again, our saboteurs. And 95% are exactly the same repetitive thoughts as the day before. We just can carry them on with us. And the more you can think about that, and the more we can kind of crack that code, is how we kind of get through and crack and hack our imposter code. Because our imposter syndrome lives in a fixed mindset. It lives with any one or all of our saboteurs that kind of make up the voice. The imposter voice is usually not its own voice. It's one of the saboteur or more voices. For me, it's the controller, it's the people pleaser, and it's usually the hyperachiever that kind of gets in there along with the judge, which is our master saboteur. So here's what I do to help really dilute imposter syndrome and actually make it work for me. First thing I do is celebrate it. I will never, as an introvert, you will never find me at a rave, but I like the colors and those little things they fly around there. I don't go to anything that has more than 4 people usually in attendance, which limits me, although it has actually worked quite well in our COVID environment. What I like to do is, when I'm starting now to feel like a fake or fraud, I don't freak, I don't get painful, I don't start to like wring my hands like I used to do and be full of angst. It's a little bit, sometimes it can be a chip on that Kinzuki kind of philosophy. And I just go, okay, that's my imposter speaking. It means I'm doing something new and different, because we are. I'm doing something new. I'm different. I'm with a new group of people, and I may feel like I don't really belong here. These people are so much more, have so much more expertise, or they're much smarter than me, or wow, they are so much more successful than me. That's still, I get that all the time, but I celebrate it because it means, wait a minute, I'm here. I'm staking my ground right here. I may feel a little intimidated at the beginning, but I'm going to celebrate the fact that I'm doing something different. Very, very key. Finesse that negativity into something you can celebrate. It's not just, I think it was Doreen who said it earlier today. It's not just affirming yourself to be, I am confident, or I feel this. It's really looking within to say, I have this within me. You have to actually do believe that, as Doreen pointed out. Once you understand that, it's like, okay, imposter, I'll take it from here. I got this. This is where most people get stuck, because they realize, oh, I feel like a fake, I feel like a fraud, and then they get stuck and they don't do anything else, or they avoid the situation. This is why this can lead to disengagement in an organization, because all of a sudden people, even high potentials in organizations, will start to shy away from opportunities. They will start to shy away from the organization. They become disengaged because the gap, the imposter gap that I talked about, becomes larger and larger and larger. It's not about they don't like the job they're doing, or they don't like the work they're doing. They're beginning to feel like, oh my gosh, I'm getting promoted because I'm doing a good job. Because remember, they're confident in their skills, but the more they get promoted, especially if they start to go up into the executive and the C-suite, they begin to feel like, but they're going to find out one of these days that I'm a fake or fraud. And then instead of loving that gap and understanding that gap, the gap is painful because they don't know where to turn. They don't know what to do around it. They can't release it and take over. And so they tend to avoid those situations, which actually does mean leaving the organization sometimes. They become disengaged, and or they can actually leave the organization. So in some orgs that I work at, when you've got what we've looked at high potentials that all of a sudden kind of plateau. They don't continue up the trajectory, or they don't go on to other lateral opportunities, which can be incredibly fulfilling. They kind of plateau, and it's like, well, Paul used to be a key talent or high potential, or whatever label we put on our talent, right? But the last few months, he really hasn't. He's really been quiet. He's really been disengaged. It might have something to do with Paul feeling like, I don't want to go any forward because I can't stand this pain anymore. Again, it's really paying attention to our thoughts. Here we have, I'm a failure. And instead of just owning that, it's like, I'm simply having a thought that I'm a failure, because we will have those thoughts, but it's observing the thoughts. It's Eckhart Tolle, the book that he wrote about, the power of now, being present. I'm having a thought right now that's kind of angry. I'm having a thought right now that I'm disappointed. It's observing ourselves having the thought versus just owning it. And then when you are able to release it, you reframe. Reframes are really, really powerful. We talked about that in my breakout session. Wait a minute, hold on a minute. I do belong here, and I have something of value to bring. This could be a simple reframe such as that. Wait a minute, I do belong here. I do an incredible amount. I really know what I'm doing in my business. I bring a lot of financial freedom to people. I help people get their numbers straight so they can go out and change the world with their business and their message. I do belong here. I have something of value to bring. This happens all the time when we get into groups and we kind of compare ourselves to other people. Reframes, very, very important. We can do I have to I can choose to. I have to go to the gym. Okay, that sounds great. Well, everyone wants to jump on that bandwagon. I can choose to go and get healthy. I can choose to go and work out and really feel good about myself. I should go to the gym, but I want to feel better is a much more fulfilling reframe. I can't do this. I've never been able to do this. How many times have we thought about that from our past? I've never been able to do this, Paul. This hasn't been something I can never do. Okay, let's throw that out for a minute. Let's reframe that. Let's not avoid it. Let's reframe that into one step at a time. So we are authoring, again, a reframe, right? Then we have to commit. And this is committing to who we are. It's committing to, as Doreen said, our essence. It's committing to taking one step at a time. My restless saboteur doesn't like to commit. You're going to do this. You're going to do that. Oh my gosh, she's offering a coaching program to make me, make me a 7-figure coach overnight. I got to sign up right now. Oh, and he's offering a thing where I can get, oh my gosh, I could write a book overnight and it could be a bestseller on Amazon. I'm going to sign up for that right now. We are bombarded daily with all of this. My restless just loves all the talking going on, but I have to commit to one step. I commit to stepping forward. I commit to being very purposeful with what I say, being very purposeful with my thoughts, being very purposeful in taking that one step. Commitment is incredibly important. And then this is something I just love. My imposter means well, because it does. Shirzad has written that our saboteurs actually mean well. They were created to help protect us. They were created to protect us in this life, which can be incredibly chaotic and incredibly volatile and incredibly beautiful. But we have to show ourselves some kindness around that. They're not bad. They're not trying to do us harm. So it's like, my imposter is meaning well, because my imposter is trying to protect me from hurt, from failure. So I understand that. I'm not going to beat up myself for feeling like a fake or a fraud, or feeling like a victim, or feeling like a controller. I'm going to just give myself a little kindness. A little kindness. I'm going to include this in the slides. This is from positivepsychology.com. They have an incredible amount of resources available to us as coaches and consultants. And this is kind of another way to look at the stress interruption technique. When we're under stress, we can stop, we observe, we breathe, we expand, and we respond. This is another way, kind of what they call the sober stress interruption technique that you can utilize as well. Remember, a lot of times we hang out with other people that can feed our imposter or can feed our saboteurs. We can't change the people around you, or you can't change the people around you, but you can change the people around you. So read that again and understand that. It's up to you in terms of what you do. And again, be careful when you follow the masses. Sometimes the M is silent. We love to follow. And as a restless, sometimes I find myself following things and it's like, wait a minute, what am I doing? So be careful when you follow the masses, or even if you just follow one person and you want to kind of ride on those coattails, or wow, that person's so successful. I'm going to, there could be something around that can be really rich for you, but be very deliberate in terms of who you're following and why you're following, right? So again, this is it just has been an incredible time for me. This I love because I'm a big traveler. I love to travel. I love to plant myself in communities and understand people. So on the left side there, you see me at one of the airline sessions I was at, where I love the whole travel brings power and love back into your life, because that's what it does from Rumi. That's absolutely what it does. On the right side is a lot of the volunteer work I do over in Southeast Asia, and I can't wait for this to begin again. Those kids are at an orphanage in Cambodia, and they're just like watching this guy like spoon out their breakfast, thinking, oh yeah, is he really going to feed me? Is he really going to get that into that plate? But that's what some of the work I just love to do is to give back in any way, shape, or form. And I've been blessed in which to do that through my whole life. So this has just been a wonderful thank you for all, for being here and for being able to share my message with all of you, learn from all of you. Oh, hold on, one more thing. Sorry about that. Let me go right back in there. Yes. So get your workshop gifts on Dropbox. You're going to be sent this in an email. But your workshop gifts are 50 ways to crack your imposter code, chapters 1-8, which is the majority of Shirzad's book, which goes over all of the saboteurs in great detail, how to dilute those saboteurs. I use some of that as well in the 50 ways to crack your imposter code. Shirzad's book also goes through the 5 sage powers, which I apologize, did not have time today to go through. And I would have, but maybe we'll talk about those a little bit later, or we'll talk about those in our individual session. But the explorer, the navigator, the activator, because that's also how we dilute our imposter. And then you'll have a copy of the presentation if you'd like to download that as well. My calendar link, which will give you any of the sessions. And if you can't find a session that meets your time, don't hesitate to just reach out to me an email, let me know, and I'm sure we can find a session that will meet your time. I'm here to serve you on that. You can also call me or send me a text, although email is actually much more preferred. As an introvert, I actually like the email piece because it just allows me time to kind of reconcile the messages. But I'm certainly available by phone or text as well. And it's been, again, a pleasure to come to your living room today and to be hosted in such a wonderful, eloquent, and just loving way. So I enjoyed this, and I hope to establish our connections going forward.
Thank you very much, Paul.